All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Or, yeah, good morning, depending where you're at. Nick, I think it's good afternoon for you.
Just cross that threshold. How you doing, Chris?
Nice. I'm well. How about yourself?
Doing great, thank you.
Okay, so good. Somebody found out how to use LinkedIn comments. So, yes, feel free to leave comments on the LinkedIn, and it will show up on our screen here. And also YouTube. You can leave comments on YouTube, and it will show up here as well. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. I'm Chris Walski. I am the owner of Applied Security Convergence. I am the guy that kind of figures out what the company is going to do, what direction it's going to go, and one of the things that we're into is maritime security, and cybersecurity is also now becoming a big part of that. And so, Coast Guard recently released I don't know, I call it the final draft of the final rule, because it hasn't officially been fully published yet on the register. But we're expecting that to happen anytime now. The interesting thing is somehow the website is broken. Federalregister.gov saying they're having a hard time registering, publishing today. So let the conspiracy theories begin, on the last working day before a new administration kicks in. So that's a little bit about me. Hey, Nick, tell me about you.
Hey, good afternoon, good morning to some. Nick Parham. I work for the United States Coast Guard Atlantic Area Command. I've worked in the position as the Marine Transportation System cybersecurity coordinator for about the past 4 years now, coming right up on my 4 year anniversary in the position. So, yeah, appreciate you inviting me in to have this discussion with you. Discussions with the port stakeholders, including folks like yourselves that help to put together these security plans and help to shepherd through new updates to the regulations like we're doing with cybersecurity. A vital part of making sure we're successful with this mission. So appreciate you, Chris, inviting me in, and looking forward to the discussion. And I'm
Great.
also glad that I'm not responsible for running any of the websites today.
Well, I guess maybe we're helping people out here by getting the highlights of it, or as I was told earlier, the meat of this. We need to work on the bones, I guess, of this. But here we go. So, first slide. So the final rule is supposed to be published today, and like I mentioned earlier, last I looked at the federalregister.gov website, it had a little note up there saying that they're having problem publishing. So with that, I was told, talking to my Coast Guard contacts here locally as well as in at the district level, the rule is deemed to be effective today. But the actual um, uh, actions related to the rule are not going to happen for 6 months or so, and we'll get into that schedule. So, invitation has been sent out for comments regarding vessel, delaying the implementation of the rule for vessels for by 2 to 5 years. There was if you go through and you look at the public comments that were made, there's a lot of concern about the cost and the time necessary to implement the cybersecurity rule at the vessel level. So we'll see how that plans out after the 60 days, and what the Coast Guard will do in responding to the comments and what steps they're going to take. So can I give you an understanding how the rule process works? So there's typically 9 steps. The nine steps 1 through 7 have been completed with the publishing of the rule today. And what that means is that step 8 and 9 still have to occur. And what step 8 is another public review of the final rule. The rule is sent to OMB, the Office of Information Regulatory Affairs, or OIRA. And what they are going to do is to take a look at it from a financial economic impact. Coast Guard went to OIRA earlier on in the rulemaking process, and OIRA determined that this is a significant rule because it has an economic impact, significant economic impact on the industry. So broadly, I believe, if I remember correctly from reading, it's like $1.6 billion potential economic impact across the industry. So that's no small potatoes. And so there's going to be that opportunity potentially for the new administration to step in and say, no, thank you. So we don't know where that's going to happen, if that's going to happen, but, kind of the history of the administration comes in just before they left on their left uh, 4 years ago. They had published a maritime cybersecurity and maritime executive order, and basically, impact, highlighted the necessity for cybersecurity in the maritime realm. So, this goes along with what they published before they left. Maybe they'll keep it, or nothing will change. Like I said, there's always the potential for it to be done. And then the final rule becomes effective 30 days after publishing. So basically, it also gives the House and Senate and the Government Accounting Office the ability for a review as well before the final rule gets actually finalized. So, Nick, you're very familiar with the background of this rule and how it came along. Can you kind of walk us through the stuff?
Sure. Yeah, not a problem. And not to get too deep behind the scenes, but you got a great outline here of essentially how this regulation came into development. Of course, those in the maritime security community have been familiar with the Maritime Transportation Security Act of 2002. That's been in place for a while. Everybody working with vessel security plans, facility security plans, getting those implemented. Of course, as the threats have evolved over the past, couple of decades, the language in the regulations have always talked about communications, and then also computer systems and networks as well have always been mentioned as part of the regulation. So building off of that, the first efforts to begin to advance, where we were in terms of any kind of cybersecurity regulations or guidance. Came in the form of NAVIC 120 that was released, early 2020, and then evolved with releasing some, tools to help to implement that and get that in place. And that was really more focused on the facility side of things. So we had the Maritime Cyber Assessment and Annex Guide that helped to kind of give it a little bit deeper dive into what that might look like for somebody trying to implement those recommendations that were in that NAVIC back in 2020. Along with that, there was a facility inspector cyber job aid that was developed. Now, those job aids are always developed for our field inspectors, so our marine science technician petty officers that go out there for the inspections. Also, the warrant officers and officers that inspect the vessels as well, and some of the petty officers that also inspect some of the foreign flag vessels. Those job aids have been developed, across the board for things. The same thing was done for the cyber side of things. And that was released also publicly as well, so that there was, full transparency about, what everybody was looking for. So the job aids out there, and then most recently, NAVIC 224, which was published at the beginning of 2024, shortly after the executive order that the Biden administration had signed, updating capital and port authorities to make sure that it was clear that cybersecurity was, an included threat and concern in any type of actions that are taken under capital and port authority. So all that's been done. And, of course, the notice of proposed rulemaking was released right about the same time as the NAVIC 224 was published, and the executive order and everything that was released last year. So we've had this time of it being out in the public to consider the language that's out there, receive the comments, make the adjustments based off of those comments where the Coast Guard determined they needed to or should. And then we have this final rule. So, like you said, we've got until July this year that they consider it the effective date. So there, as you said, there's some deadlines that are in there, and we'll get into that. But yeah, that kind of gives the background of everything and how we've gotten to where we are today.
Yeah, I was sitting there. I'm a glutton for punishment, and I actually read all 300 and was it 70 pages of the with all the comments in it. And I tell you, if if you really want something that's going to help you put to sleep, that may be the document to do it. But the other thing to go with it is for me, it helped me also kind of get in the mindset of what Coast Guard's looking at. And some of the responses that they had in there to the comments. And the other thing that was kind of neat was that they even went down and replied to comments to individual users that submitted. It wasn't just the trade groups that submitted comments, but individual users, and they addressed those individual comments of even just a specific user. So in the future, if more rules or opportunities to come and look at public documents like this and make comments, make them because they got to respond to them.
I appreciate. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, Chris, and I'm sure our folks up at the headquarters office they have been grinding away for the past few months at those. I'm sure they appreciate hearing that feedback.
Yeah. And at least one person read them. Yeah.
Yeah, at least definitely.
So the scope, yeah. So we're looking at the scope, and I guess it really covers anything that's subject to MTSA regulation. It covers all your Part 104, 105, and 106 entities. So, yeah, I mean, I guess it really says everybody be ready. They placed the rule at Part 101 just so that would cover everything underneath it. So. Implementation timeline, 16 July is when the rule 2025 comes into 16 July 2025 is when the rule comes into effectiveness. So basically 6 months from today, assuming the rule gets published today. So that's the date that they have. 12 January 2026 is a key date because once the rule becomes effective, Coast Guard's saying you have to make sure everybody is meeting training requirements. And if you look there, I've got a list of the subsections, and it's training for everybody in the organization that deals with the regulated portion of the organization. So it's the everyday computer user to the person that's going to be designated the CISO. So the entire area is going realm is up to needing training, and it has to be completed by then. 16 July 2027, so it's basically 2 years from the effective date. You have to have 3 things done. And what you have is you have to have a CISO designated in writing, and that's going to be done via your new document called the Cybersecurity Plan. You have had completed your cybersecurity assessment. Very much familiar. If you're very much familiar with the facility security assessment, it's basically the same thing, but cyber focused. And then submission of your cybersecurity plan to U.S. Coast Guard for approval. So it doesn't say it has to be approved by July 2027, just that it has to be submitted. And then once the CSP has been approved, an organization has to start doing drills and exercises. On top of it, they have 60 days from the approval date to do one more round of training on the approved CSP. So it's an additional training requirement that everybody involved in the regulatory side has to complete. So, anything you want to add on this, Nick?
Yeah, Chris. No, that's. I think you did a great job of highlighting it, and just one thing to point out, in terms of the reporting, that's something that's also been covered previously in that NAVIC 224 and was kind of pushed out with that executive order. So, hopefully those reports are being made. This just kind of reemphasizes that's part of the expectation that those reports are made to the National Response Center. And then the other thing I just wanted to highlight, and it does speak to it a little bit in the final rule. There may be, some question there about, well, the training has to be done by January of next year, but we don't even have to designate a CYSO until, July of 2027, right? So understand how that could, maybe be a question. It does speak to that in terms of, what the expectations are for, fulfilling those CYSO type duties. It's essentially falls to the designated either vessel security officer, facility security officer, until such time that the CYSO has been designated. So just keep that in mind now. The training about that, what those roles and responsibilities will be, still be expected. It's just, you could understand how there might be some confusion there. So just to hopefully clear that up a little bit, but it does speak to that. I don't recall this specific part, but if you go through there, you'll see that there, that basically it falls back to that designated individual until such time that they've done so with the CYSO.
Good info. Let's see. Oh, somebody just dropped in case you missed it. In addition to the federalregister.gov hiccup, it appears that there's a wider outage in DC for DC systems. So it's a why. Again, more conspiracy theory kicking off before the new.
Lots of confirmation hearings and all kinds of other stuff going on to maybe jamming up the feed. Who knows?
Yeah. So we talked about identifying who the CISO is or CYSO. Not to confuse it with CISO or CISO or all the C-suite position that is commonly found in especially publicly traded companies. But the CISO is the person that's going to be responsible for this program within an organization. So at the maritime organizations now, you have a vessel security officer or a facility security officer, and they're responsible for the physical security piece of it. This is going to be another person, or it could be the same, that is going to be responsible for handling the cybersecurity for that facility or vessel. So what is the CISO responsible for? Well, the cybersecurity plan, the incident response plan, and ensuring the training of the personnel that are applicable to this. And then again, ranging for assessments, audits, et cetera, just like they would do if an organization would do for physical security. What's neat is that they're not expecting every organization to go out and hire somebody to do this. It could be a collateral duty. It could be somebody that's full-time. It could be the top person in the organization, or it could be somebody that is cyber savvy, and they're going to be assigned as a collateral duty. From what I understand, the way I read it in the comments was that they intended the position to be filled by somebody that maybe only has an information security analyst level of understanding, and not necessarily somebody that has the entire understanding of the entire organization's cyber program. So, me and Nick, I think beforehand we were talking about, this is could be like perfect for somebody that's a project manager to, that has some cyber background to, take on the task.
I mean, the key, I think you make a great point there, and really it becomes an emergency management function, much like the facility security officer and the vessel security officer is. The key is that person that's designated understands the vulnerabilities, understands the threats that are there, how they might be compromised, and then essentially who to call for help either within the company or contracted organization for support should you find yourself being the victim of a cyber attack that's impacting your operations. So that's essentially somebody that can gather that information, act on it, and be kind of that conduit as well for the officials that are going to be reaching out from Coast Guard, whether it be Coast Guard, FBI, CISA, And again, understand that you guys don't want to get called by all three of us, but whoever that might be, making those contacts, they have a designated person to contact or their alternate, and making that adaptation for alternates in case somebody does have to be away. So, yep.
Yeah, that's that single point of contact, and you see that a lot within the physical security side, the documents. Who's the company security officer? Who's and that's company security officer is pertinent with the vessels and for outer continental shelf, right? Because you could have more than one facility, and so you have that one person point of contact. So it could be, yeah. And somebody mentioned, BISO or Business Information Security Officer. I mean, it could potentially be that person that's at the department or unit or bureau level. So that's a very good, potential person to be able to fill this position. But again, if you're, Coast Guard look at this not only from somebody the size of like Shell, but they also looked at it from the size of, like one of the companies I work with is a construction company and there's 5 employees, right? So they look at it from, the size of that small business all the way to the mega companies like Shell or Exxon that have to have all this. So um, interesting is, the way they looked at it is, you know, um, it seems like they kind of have the thought is like, okay, well, it's small business, small amount of technology. But, if you're a small business that depends heavily on technology, you could have quite a bit of technology and a small staff to actually manage and run it. So it kind of, the scale may differ depending on what the business or the regulated entity does. So continuing on to be a CISO. So we mentioned that they got to be designated in writing. So this is typically going to be found in writing is your cybersecurity plan or CSP, and then necessary qualifications. And here's the thing: this wording came out of the rule. It just says they have to have the necessary education, training, and experience. It doesn't say that they have to have any sort of information security certification. It doesn't say you have to have like a CISSP or a CISM or any of the top level type certifications that you might see as a requirement for like Department of Defense contractors or anything like that. They just want you as an organization to make the determination if that person has education, training, experience. Now, Coast Guard, I guess Nick is Coast Guard could push back and saying that a potential person may not have that experience necessary. Is that something? Do you think that could happen if they're like, well, they chose Joe's cousin who happens to know how to do computers to be their CISO?
Right. That's a great question. I think it's still to be determined in terms of, if we try to draw some threshold and kind of getting back to that point you made earlier in terms of the small business entities, right, and the impact to those folks, having to understand that there has to be some flexibility built into this in order to, in order for everybody to accomplish this without, totally, running up the bill on what this is, going to cost to them. So, we talked earlier about the facility inspector cyber job aid. Imagine there'll be updates to the job aid that will be provided and again shared. So if there's any kind of expectation there about what that threshold is, it'll either be follow-up documents like that, or possibly NAVIC or frequently asked question type documents that have been published with some of our recent regulations.
Yeah. So I know that locally here in Houston, the Greater Houston Port Bureau and the Houston Ship Channel Security District has contracted out, cybersecurity officer training. And so they're looking at providing training that would basically, I guess, cover all the things under the knowledge and skills area to sit there and help, I guess, certify. I mean, in Houston, I don't know where it is elsewhere, but we had FSO training, right? And that was kind of deemed as okay, helps organizations meet the requirements that somebody has gotten the physical security training side of things. And so with the CISO training is kind of the same idea, is that it's going to help those people that fill that role make that. So I guess if you're in the Houston area, and you're part of the Ship Channel Security District, check in with them to see more about the training opportunity. All right, cybersecurity plan. This is the part that's going to be part of the big pain in the butt for a lot of organizations. It's a document, and it's got 14 sections. Got a lot of information that needs to be put into it, and it covers everything from the administration, account security, and device security. And then, with all that, after we get through talking about the cybersecurity plan, if for your organization, really, really need to sit there and start planning now. Don't wait until 2027 to start doing this. You need to start this year and start taking action this year to be ready by July 2027. Depending on the size of your organization, technology, and everything you got in place, you're going to end up potentially having to spend some money to meet the technology requirements of this. Or, if you really need to hire somebody, either contract or as a full-time employee, to sit there and manage it. So again, it depends on the size of your business and your individual business needs, organization's needs. But yeah, this plan, um, it's a doozy, just like a facility security plan or a vessel security plan. It's renewed every 5 years, and it's just something that an organization has to do, and it has to be submitted to Coast Guard, captain of the port, right, for their review.
Yeah, yeah, and just to kind of go along with that, definitely understand that if you're starting from scratch, that can definitely seem overwhelming. Hopefully there's at least a start that was taken with the Navic 120 implementation, especially on the facility side of things. So you at least got a starting point, and it's really just kind of building off of that. The vessel security plans as well. Uh, there was work instructions that were released by our Office of Vessel Compliance as well that had some requirements there as well. So hopefully this is something if people haven't started on, they've definitely been considering. Understand that doesn't necessarily make it any less painful sometimes, but hopefully it's not catching anybody totally off guard as well. And be as the as everybody goes through the process, the Coast Guard works on developing more guidance, making sure that whether it's the inspections, petty officers, warrant officers, and junior officers that are out there, or the cyber specialists, the MTS cyber specialists that are local to each one of the captain of the port offices as well. My civilian counterparts that are there as well. That'll be part of the that continued engagement, just like I'm doing today, continuing to engage with the stakeholders to help to work through those questions as it comes through. So definitely understand.
Yeah.
It looks like a daunting task, but hopefully understand there's going to be support provided as well.
Yep. So, the other thing that was interesting about the document with the proposed rule, or the actual rule now, is that they actually state in there the consolidated plans are not accepted, which kind of goes against what we've seen with the facility security plans, especially for vessels and outer continental shelf facilities. That those plans typically are facilities for consolidated for those entities. I guess based on my reading, is maybe it's because of the network maps and software and hardware and all that. But you think that there's going to be future potentially of everything being consolidated instead of having individual plans for each vessel or facility.
Yeah, so I think that's definitely something to keep in mind, and where we've seen that kind of I guess, adapted previously, is essentially to have kind of a baseline plan where you may have some type of facility or some type of vessel that conducts the same type of operations as three or four other in your fleet or your area of responsibility, and then they come up with individual annexes for those different spots, those different vulnerabilities that have been identified based on physical location or physical differences. So I'd imagine something like that will be something that it will be considered. So if that needs to be clarified, moving forward, that's definitely something. There's comments that can still be submitted. I know it's called for on the vessel side of things, but if that's something that there's a major concern for, that can also be expressed. And I'd imagine there's discussions that can be had to essentially get to a point where looking at it, if it's more of a appendices type of adaptation to kind of accommodate those type of situations.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it go either way, especially with the appendices piece of it, or just a reference in a document saying, okay, here's how we're going to provide that information to you. And some of the information that goes into a CSP, part of it is now some of the technical pieces, like related to account management and account security. This is section 7 of the CSP, and it requires these 7 items to be addressed and documented. Now, the way I read it and I interpret it is it's more about the process of how you're going to do things and how you're going to validate, and less about the actual listing of all the users and everything that goes along with day-to-day account management. So this is where you can see where maybe potentially you're going to want to make sure whoever your potential CISO is must have an understanding of all 7 areas.
Yeah, no, you make a great point, and this is where you kind of see going above and beyond what we did with what the Coast Guard did with the NAVIC 120, recommendations, and now we start to see a little bit more. And again, there's always been that concern about being, too prescriptive, being too detailed about what we require with security versus being more kind of descriptive, give a general sense of what we're looking for. So, looking to strike a balance between the two. Without, because if you narrow it down to just 1 or 2 options, again, technology being what it is, the cyber threat actors being what they are, it quickly changes, and you quickly look for ways to overcome those type of things. So, looking to leave enough room for people to adapt, but still kind of set some standards for what we're looking for to put in place.
All right. So as you see, a lot of what's in here is it's really basic account management. Everything from making sure default passwords are changed on any equipment that's coming in. Protecting or MFA by password protected IT systems. It doesn't really get into specification if it's like, okay, MFA for the software or MFA when you have to log into a computer. The verbiage almost seems like it's MFA when you log into a computer. And separately, they require MFA for remote connectable OT systems. And by remote connectable, typically, I think what they're looking at is if you have a third party, or if you and your organization have engineers that work remotely, and they need to get into the operational technology equipment, that in order to get into it from the internet, they need to be able to, one, use a username and password that is unique to them, but 2, also be able to respond to an MFA request before getting to it. So those are the types of things that you would be looking at, is potentially needing new technology requirements, or purchasing of software or services to meet these requirements. A lot of this is, considered, basic cyber hygiene, for some, especially, separation of regular user and privileged accounts. So, all right, let's see. I do see a couple of questions here, and I will get that in just a little bit after we get through the security measures. All right, so device security measures. CSP Section 6 covers hardware, firmware, software inventory of authorized systems to be installed. So you have IT and OT systems. You actually have to have an inventory, and this is where I think that how you address the requirement is going to be interesting, because they want an inventory and they want to be part of the CSP, but inventories are fluid, from week to week, and you don't want to have to do a CSP every time your inventory changes. So what's the thought with regards to the inventory management piece of this, not only for the hardware firmware, but also inventory of network connected systems? What kind of thought process is that an organization should be taking to get this into the CSP?
Well, I'd say at a minimum, there's a snapshot at the time of the assessment, right? So it requires an assessment to be done prior to drafting the cybersecurity plan right now. So at a minimum, that inventory conducted during that assessment. And then I would not, I would not say that this is something that needs to be submitted. Typically with things like this, when there's things that are changing, often rapidly, it's essentially made available to the Coast Guard upon request, or made available to the Capitol Port upon request. So that would be what I would foresee. Again, that's whether that's the final final determination on that, but I would see something similar to that. Kind of language kind of being implemented, understanding exactly that it is so fluid. But at a minimum, making sure that was inventory was conducted at the time of the assessment. I think that's a reasonable expectation. But again, with the understanding that down the road, it's going to change potentially rapidly.
Yeah, for me, yeah, it does. And I think the other thing is if as I go out and I'm going to be doing, I do audits and inspections, not inspections, but audits and assessments for the organizations, right? For me, it'd be like, okay, I'll walk up to a computer and say, okay, show me where this is in your inventory, and be able to produce an inventory record, right? I think that would be kind of how I would go about it. From if I was a Coast Guard inspector, come out and say, okay, show me this device, and you show me the serial number, and it's inside of your inventory, kind of a spot check type thing. With audits and assessments, it's about examining, inspecting, and testing, the plan or the documents to make sure that you're meeting all the requirements. So that would be kind of the way I would probably test it, is make sure that that actually exists in some sort of thing. And then same thing with network map, make sure that a device is on a network, that it's listed on the map somewhere, at least in some generic form. I mean, again, Cisco switch number or whatever on a network map may not. That's a huge administrative oversight and burden to have to go down to that level. But if you have a generic network map that says, okay, we have the router, we have a switch, and these are the computers, and this is where the VLANs go, and the segmentation, and it shows all of that, then that would likely meet the requirements for device security measures. Additionally, the device and account, they want you to protect the data. And so the data that they're looking at is system logs. They want non-repudiation. They want to be able to sit there and go back and point at a certain time that an event occurred, and you could go back and do post-event or incident analysis, or the logs can be used potentially to be able to detect, odd behavior, those types of things. But the key point is that you're gathering the logs, and two, those logs are only going to be accessed by a certain level of people. So, typically your systems administrators or people that have the need to know. In larger organizations, the system administrators and even your potentially information security program people don't have access to the logs. It could be a set of audit, could be a function of the audit team, and they would only have access to the logs. So it depends on the log and where and who has access to it. But that's one piece of it. And then finally, employing encryption, and really this is, I think, more along the lines of encryption for data in transit. So that you're not transmitting things over the internet, and kind of go to where you're talking about, Cody, is the connectable IT connectable or OT connectable devices. You need to be able to make sure that they're not accessible and that the communication's encrypted. Ran across yesterday. I got connected to. I got involved in an incident where somebody reached out and said, "Hey, Chris, can you reach out to the CISO of this electric company? We found some of their OT open on and available on the internet, and that OT controlled fuel pumps, and so it shouldn't have been open and available on the internet, but it was something that a third party set up for them, and so." One, it wasn't encrypted. Two, it was no username and password. It was just there, and it was not properly configured. So you really, the idea behind these security measures is to prevent something like that happening. You may have security gates or pumps and valves and all that have OT connected, and they may be remote and they have to come back via the internet to a central location for management. And sometimes those things don't get set up and configured correctly. So that's really where Section 4 of the CSP is trying to prevent those type of incidents.
Yeah,
you got anything to add?
You captured it beautifully as always, Chris, and detailed it, and ultimately, and just kind of to ping off of one thing with the systems logs, and just kind of give a plug for our cyber protection teams. I mean, that's kind of one of the key things in any incident response team that you might call in. I mean, I think you'd agree that's one of the key things that they're looking for, so they can have that available in their forensic analysis and figure out where that starting point is. To start to help to hunt and clear the systems, indicators of compromise, all those things that they're looking for. Without that in place, it really makes their job more difficult. So, but the outward-facing devices and those that may have unintended consequences of having remote access. Yeah, I think you captured it perfectly.
All right, so we move on to the other section, or administrative or risk management measures, and this basically covers sections 11 and 12 and a portion of 6. And so what you're looking at is requirements to have a cybersecurity assessment, and right now it's a requirement that you have an annual assessment or every 5-year an assessment of your security plan. And so right now you do that for physical, for your vessel and your facilities. So you put that in there, you put the recommendations and the resolutions. You just got to add a section to that document now for cyber. So you use the same document that you did to document your previous assessments. A new item is a penetration test, and it's performed in conjunction with the CSP renewal, so every 5 years. And then You want to address routine system maintenance. So system maintenance, you got to think about is, okay, what are you going to do for patching? How are you managing your vulnerabilities? One of the key things that with the FSP and the VSP is that they had to annotate and provide via Coast Guard Form 6025 a list of all of the vulnerabilities, physical security vulnerabilities. I know that District 8 for Outer Continental Shelf is requiring it for cyber vulnerabilities for the Outer Continental Shelf facilities. But this document does not specifically require that. It doesn't say that it has to be a form CG 6025 has to be provided. But you just have to be able to share threat and vulnerability with external stakeholders, aka U.S. Coast Guard. is that and so those are the types of things that you're going to be having to look at as being another administrative item that you may have to take on.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Chris. And again, you kind of highlight what we've already kind of discussed a little bit in terms of any kind of forms and guidance that likely needs to be updated in conjunction with this. So I think that pretty much anything associated with MTSA and the forms and documents and job aids, that's all going to be on the table as we move forward with this to take into consideration. And certainly, feedback like that is going to be key in terms of what truly kind of helps to answer those questions, and what helps to kind of move the ball forward for everybody as we look to improve cybersecurity.
Yep, definitely. All right, second part of risk management. Everything has been going on about supply chain, and especially in this current administration, about their concerns with China and Chinese technology being purchased or implemented inside of equipment, not only just from purchases of IT type of equipment, but operational technology and devices that uses that operational technology, i.e. ship to short grains is a big thing that came up this past year. So now they want you to take and have a better understanding of your procurement process and the vulnerabilities and issues that may come with procurement. The other thing is, kind of mentioned with the gas pump that was openly exposed, better management of your third-party connections, your third parties that have access to your environment. There actually is in there a requirement that if you have somebody coming in to your environment that has not gone through any of the training that you have set up for cybersecurity for your organization, you have to monitor their access. So it's almost like the escort rule for physical security. You almost have to escort that person while they're doing their work inside of your environment, virtual escort. So that's something that's you're going to have to potentially take a look at and how you determine how you're going to implement. Resilience, again, this all comes back to understanding the backup program, how you're going to do your data backups, evaluating periodically your security plan and incident response plan. So these are not intended to be documents that you'd write up and you put on a shelf. These are items that should be reviewed periodically and tested. And hence the reason and need for drills and exercises. And the other thing they want you to do is make sure you have, and we kind of hit this earlier, is the network segmentation. Make sure you restrict access to the operational technology networks. And even though it's not really network segmentation, but they want you to make sure that you control unauthorized media from being utilized inside of your environment. So does that mean turning off USB ports, potentially, finding software that does that? Or, I've seen where people take in like caulk and filled the USB port with dielectric caulk that prevents the USB ports from the devices being used. So the final set of risk management measures. All right,
No,
cyber incident. Yeah, go ahead.
No, yeah, perfect. I was reading. I finally realized how to read the comments. So I was reading through the comments. Sorry. Hopefully there was anything there, but I was finally reading through the comments. Looks like some great comments there. So it looks like
Yeah.
we've answered most of them. But yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the cyber incident response plan, literally, this is pretty much all it really says about it in the document is that you have to have one. And in it, you must identify the people and their roles, their responsibilities, and identify who the decision makers are. Now, how you go about writing your incident response plan, is one of those things that I would go back and I would look at industry best practices of what an incident response plan looks like. There's a lot of great examples out there that you can go and pull down, and if you don't already have one, to actually go and build one out. And this should be basically an appendix of your CSP that when you submit your CSP, you have that included in there because captain of the port's going to want to know. They're going to want to evaluate and see, okay, do you have phone numbers for CISA? Do you have phone numbers for Coast Guard and for the NRC and whoever else may be part of your incident response process?
I think, and I think you highlighted it perfectly. You know, a lot of it just kind of mirrors what we've done on the physical side for years. It's just making sure that procedure is covered when it comes to the cyber side of things. So if it's, if you've empowered your individual, the company may prefer for somebody to contact the CYSO before, say, contacting the Coast Guard, the National Response Center, or something like that. We wanted to go through the CYSO to be that point of contact to the National Response Center, things like that. Or, depending on the size and the training involved, they may, want the user to go ahead and make that call directly to National Response Center, depending on, those evaluations. But the Coast Guard's not going to make that call, but we just want to make sure that you've documented it so it's clear to everybody what that expectation is for your employees, especially those working within security sensitive areas.
All right, so I alluded to drills and exercise. So if you're familiar with physical security requirements, for facilities and for vessels, they have to do a drill quarterly, and because of feedback received via the comments, the original draft said quarterly as well, and Coast Guard modified that based on the comments to make it twice a year. So twice each calendar year, you have to do it. Annual exercise is the same periodicity as you find for physical security exercise. Good news is both the drill and annual exercises can be combined with the physical security. So the cyber tabletop exercise or cybersecurity drill that you do, you can combine it with the physical security one. So you can integrate them in there. The caveat is just like with the physical security is you must test the communication notification procedures when you're doing your drill. And same thing with the annual exercise. It's got to be able to test. So annual exercise covers the entire CSP. It should fully stress that CSP, making sure that if the CSP is still valid and still works, and then also make sure that your team is kind of staying razor sharp on doing their incident responses and managing the program. Now the drills and exercise may be full scale or live, so you can have actual injects into them if you want, or you can do a tabletop and sit around and talk about it, or you combine it with other exercises as highlighted in part 104, 105, and 106. Record management. Just like we do for physical security, you have to maintain records of the training, etc. And so what you're looking at is, additional items. My clients, they maintain a FSO binder, You may want to consider adding these items to the FSO binder or creating a new CYSO binder that has all the records in it, because Coast Guard comes out to a facility or vessel, they're going to say, show me. And these are items that you are required to be able to show.
Just one
And
thing.
finally, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say one thing on there with the audits, and it just kind of highlights, so we talked a lot about the 5-year interval for renewals. The audits is an annual requirement, right? So it's just to kind of highlight that this, while it's expected that, you get the assessment done and you get it submitted, reviewed, and everything by the Coast Guard, it's not expected to sit there for 5 years either, or just until you have an incident. That audit is meant, and it's been in place for the physical side as well. The same thing for the cyber side. That audit is meant to verify, validate everything, and take into account those lessons learned from the exercises and drills and everything else, and make sure that you're actually addressing things that maybe aren't 3 to 4 or 5 years old. You're keeping up to date with the current threat. So yeah, glad you had that in there, and just to highlight kind of why we look for that. Not only in this, but also the physical security plans as well.
Perfect. All right, so CSP follows a lot of the same themes, format, and flow as like your vessel security plan or facility security plan. So it shouldn't be too difficult. I have actually started producing a template, a CSP that I'm going to be using with my clients, so that we can start filling in the blanks as we go along. Thing you could do now as you start looking at this rule is start looking at a gap analysis, see where you stand in your cybersecurity program now and how it compares to the requirements of the rule, and start addressing them. Start looking at, do you need to make budget changes for new technology, or do we need to hire somebody to come in to do some of this work, or actually hire somebody to be your CYSO? There's all those types of things need to be looked at now, as opposed to 6 months or a year from now, because trust me, 2 years will go quick. And especially if you like put this on the back burner, it'll be on the back burner for a long time. So CYSO is essentially going to be that point of contact for cybersecurity for that vessel or facility. It does not mean that person's going to be the point of contact for the company as a whole. So, look at it from that aspect. Do you want, if I was a CISO and I was at a company, if I, and I had multiple facilities or multiple vessels, I'd probably want to delegate this responsibility down to those facilities, because those people know it best. But again, I want to make sure that person has the ability to sit there and meet the requirements within the rule. So, any final comments?
No, Chris, I really appreciate the time. Appreciate you inviting me in. I think you summarized it extremely well. And, again, this is just one step in continuing to build this, build this out for everybody. So understand there's going to be questions, concerns that, continue to be raised. And, we'll work with stakeholders like yourselves and the rest of the court level, to work and move forward. But hopefully everybody understands. And you said you hinted towards it. There's potential for change on the horizon, but I think everybody understands the value in these efforts, and this has crossed administrations and political lines. Our adversaries that are out there are not looking at what political affiliations we have. They're looking for a lot of other stuff, but that's not the number one thing. So. I think if we all keep that in mind and we keep moving forward, I think we're all going to do, and we've come a long way. So I think we're going to continue to build on that, and I look forward to continuing to engage with stakeholders like yourselves and the others that have joined us today. So appreciate anybody else, and thanks again for the time, Chris. Always appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you having you come on and helping me out here. So here's the location of the final rule. If it ever gets published, this is where you'll be able to find it. The link does work. It just comes up and says it's not published yet. So, and then they give you a link to the unpublished version, so which has all the comments. Additionally, feel free to reach out to me, Chris at appsecconv.com, or hit me up on LinkedIn, and I'd be glad to help you out and answer any questions. And if I can't answer them, I know Nick, and I can reach out to him, and or you can reach out to him as well. So thank you everybody for attending, and this was my very first webinar, and so hopefully it was a success. Have a great day, and if you're in the South, bundle up because it's about to get really cold. So take care. Have a great day.
Thanks. Take care.